Preparing for this evening, I had thought over several subjects which would have been interesting topics for this address. However, I kept coming back in my mind to a speech I made a few weeks ago on the issue of gay marriage, and how the discussion left many concerns unresolved. I respect the diverse opinions on this issue and how deep-seated they are from religious and ideological standpoints. I admit that gay marriage could be a leap for many people, and the process of convincing society that it is a matter of equality may take a long time. While I assure that I will never waver in this endeavor, I also understand the sensitivity on both sides of the issue. What I would like to concentrate on tonight, however, are some of the arguments raised that the issue of gay rights in general is not a matter of fundamental civil rights. I vehemently disagree, and further argue that it is in fact the transcendent civil rights issue of our generation. For sake of context, I think it's important to take a look at the background of what we have known to be called civil rights. For many, the words conjure up vivid images of the struggles of African Americans, and some tend to look at the words through that lens alone. And while the importance of the civil rights movement in response to unspeakable oppression of African Americans cannot be overstated, many other groups also fall under the veil of civil rights. Native Americans removed from their lands, the cancer of slavery, the repression of women in an open democracy, Japanese Americans interned at Manzanar, oppression of migrant farm workers in California, and so many more examples. And yes, including men and women beaten and murdered for being gay. Our history is rich with these abuses of humanity, these blights of a remorseful nation. Any of these by themselves are a scourge to the greatness of our potential as Americans, and the sum of all is purely inhuman. None of these examples, along with the scores of examples unspoken, trump or even mitigate the other. The abuses are vast and varied, but none can be unequal to the other, because to say otherwise is to admit that any wrong, any oppression matters more or less than another. Civil rights cannot be guaranteed for any class unless they are guaranteed for all classes. To have otherwise is to deflate the quintessential argument for equality, those unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are for all. Black or white, Baptist or Muslim, rich or poor, gay or straight. So it is clear that you cannot compare the suffering of one oppressed group to another. Doing so diminishes its importance in history and its warning never to repeat it. But you certainly can compare the pathology of those who hate. What common threads exist, no matter what group is the subject of oppression. Over many centuries, fundamentalist religious teaching of all kinds has given momentum for movements of hate. From the Crusades to the Taliban, from the Ku Klux Klan to Bob Jones University, oftentimes these acts of man debase the teachings of a loving God and a peaceful religion. Sometimes people hate simply because of lack of understanding. Perhaps the fundamental argument on the table for some is that gay people do not deserve equal treatment because of a choice that they have made. Maybe at some point in their lives, they just decided to be that way. The reasons why someone would believe this vary, but are not so important. What is important is that it is a position of ignorance. To those who believe this, I would submit a question. When in history has a group chosen to be oppressed? Why would anyone ask to be the target of ridicule, bullying, and threats? The only choice involved is on the part of the oppressor, who chooses persecution over inclusion. The hate spewed from pulpits to playgrounds is the true choice, one made out of absolute lack of understanding and compassion for people who are different. No, you cannot compare the oppressed, but you can glimpse into the eyes of the oppressor, and when you do, you realize that the themes of intolerance are common and that prejudice does not discriminate. So we ask ourselves if gay rights is a civil rights issue. And it's simple. A minority class, which is so from birth, is being deprived of certain constitutional rights and legal protections that the majority class enjoys as irrevocable, ineffaceable, and inalienable. That by itself is a definition of civil rights. But civil rights also include those which are derived from a higher law, which are governed by a standard that transcends governments and generations. Humanity requires that we are stewards of justice for all people. Yes, gay rights is most certainly a civil rights issue. And if you disagree, I would like you to think about Matthew Shepard, a 21-year-old college student in Laramie, Wyoming, who was tied to a fence, pistol whipped, and left for dead because he was gay. And tell me that gay rights are not a civil rights issue. I want you to think about Danny Overstreet, whom a man killed along with injuring 6 others when he walked into a bar, proclaiming that he wanted to waste some faggots. Think of Danny and tell me that gay rights are not civil rights. Think of Private First Class Barry Winchell, a gay soldier who was beaten to death by other service members while sleeping in his cot. I beg you to tell me that gay rights are not civil rights. I want you to think of Billy Gaither, who was bludgeoned to death and set on fire for being gay. And think about Lawrence King, a 15-year-old boy who was shot at point-blank range after coming out at school. Please, tell me, tell Matthew, Danny, and Lawrence's mothers and fathers, tell a grieving world that gay rights are not civil rights. Coretta Scott King, Dr. Martin Luther King's widow, said, "I hasten to remind people that Martin said, 'Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.' I appeal to everyone who believes in Martin Luther King's dream to make room at the table of brother and sisterhood for lesbian and gay people." These are more than just words. They are a call to action. Beyond this classroom, there are real people, men and women of every age, every race, every background, and every station in life, who simply ask for your acknowledgement of their right to be who they are. And when you really think about it, what do you lose in the deal? Is your way of life really threatened, as some say? Do your marriages really need to be protected from theirs? Would unwanted children really be better off in group homes than in loving families with 2 moms or 2 dads? I urge you to look at these very practical questions and tell me what is more important, especially in a country where we confuse our children when we teach them that all men are created equal. This is not about the semantics of comparing one struggle to another. It is about the elemental notion that oppression of any kind is simply wrong. Millions upon millions of people around the world are standing up and demanding equality. And we will win.